Hello sculpture students. Today I want to show you a few things about the next few steps that you'll be doing on your wire figure since I'm not there to help you, or if you were absent and you need some extra help just to kind of go through the steps. So I'm going to run through a few basics and then we're going to talk about the next maybe 10 steps that we're going to get going on, and that's going to carry you through until I can be there to help you again. So where we're at as far as where we left off last time, we had made our leg, first leg, and we had made the foot, and then we made a loop for the ankle 3 inches up from that, a loop for the knee 3 inches up from that, a loop for the hip, and then you had the wire twisted back along that first wire all the way back down to the tip of your toes. You lock down at the tip of the toes a few times, and then you close that little foot kind of shape that looks like a paper clip, and then after that you started to create the loops for the foot. So you went around that and tried to create the volume of the foot, and then you locked down here near the ankle loop. So that's kind of where we left off. Some of you were a little further along than others. And even if your foot doesn't look perfect at this time, it's okay. We're just going to move on. We'll come back later and do some adjusting of all the loops. But I'm going to go ahead and show you the next few steps here. We're going to complete this first leg, and then we're going to come over from that leg over to the second leg, and then I'll show you how to make that second leg, and then hopefully by the time you're finished you'll be back up to the top of the second leg and you'll have your first two legs finished and ready for the next few steps. So for today I'm just going to be talking about finishing the legs, and then we'll save the torso and some of the other details for a later video. So the first step I would do is go ahead and loosen up your Velcro and give yourself a little more wire. So I usually think that the best way to do this is take out enough that it's kind of the space between your two hands when you stretch out your arms. So you can't see this on the video, but I'm letting out another maybe 6 feet of wire here, and then I'm going to take my Velcro, clamp it back down so that it stays under control for me while I'm sculpting today. And then this loop of wire, usually what I suggest is that you just put it on the floor right in front of you and just kind of let it hang out there, and then you should have enough wire for the next few pieces that we're going to do. So here I am back with my wire. I lock down at the ankle right here. You can see I've got a couple of tight loops right there, and let me grab my pliers. So I've got my two sets of pliers. If these two loops right here are not tight enough, what you can do is take your pliers and you can really squeeze down on those loops. Okay, so you just take your pliers and you just squeeze really tight, and that should help lock that down a little bit more. What we do by locking down is we want the wire to kind of stay there so that we can start our next section. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to loop up until I get to the knee, and then I'm going to lock down right below the knee. So I'm going to make some loops for the lower part of the leg, the kind of above the ankle and the shin, and then I'm going to make it a little thicker where that calf muscle is, so it is a little thicker there at the calf muscle. Then I'm going to lock it down around this main wire right below the loop. Then I'm going to start up here and start making loops to make the thigh. Again, it's a little smaller near the knee, it gets a little wider as we go up toward the hip, and then we'll lock that down right below the hip loop, which will be right about here. Okay, so I'm going to do that next. So again, I can hold this with my pliers and I can start creating these loops. How many do you make? I usually suggest about 6. So I make one loop like that, kind of adjust it until I feel like it's the right size and shape. Again, use your pliers so your fingers don't get sore, and then you can just kind of keep rotating your leg. So this is how I do it. I hold my foot and I twist my leg around, and as I do that I make more loops, and then if I need to get them closer together I can just squeeze them closer together a little bit. I'd say, like I said, 6 loops is good. It doesn't have to be 6. As I get closer to the knee I should be getting a little bigger with my loops because the calf muscle is a little bit bigger, so I just keep turning my leg, twisting it and making more loops. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 loops now. I'm going to do at least 2 more. I might do 3 more. Again, if you get 6 or 7, you're probably in pretty good shape to get up to the knee. And you know what? If you do 8, it's okay. So I don't want you to worry too much about the number. I just think 6 or 7 is a good number. So right now I've got 1, 2, 3. Sorry there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think I'm going to go 6 and 7. And then I'm going to stop because I'm just below the loop that is the knee loop. Okay, so I feel like the top of mine is just a little too big, so I'm going to close up some of my loops. I got a little too big at the calf, so I'm squeezing those. Okay, so you can see I've got some volume. It's skinnier here, it gets a little bigger as it goes up towards the calf, and I can go back and I can adjust these now if I need to and make things a little smaller. I think I made the loops maybe a little too big, so I can always go back and adjust. Alright, that's pretty good. It's not perfect, but I can always go back and I can change it a little bit. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to lock it down below this knee loop. So what I do is I hold the wire right here, and I'm going to hold it against my leg. This is the sort of armature or skeleton inside this part. So I've got the wire squeezed between my pliers and my leg, and there's a little space here between where I'm at and the loop for the knee. So I hold that really tight, and then I'm going to wrap this around at least twice, maybe 3 times. And what that's going to do is that's going to lock this down. So you can see there, now I've got it locked down there. So if I need to come back and mess with this part right here, I can adjust these wires later, but it won't change what happens below that or above that. So I can just go back and fix these wires. Okay? So now I'm going to start again. I'm going to start making the loops for the thigh. These are going to be a little bigger. Again, I just start looping it around. I sometimes use my thumb to kind of bend the wire like this, but you can also use your pliers and just hold it, grab it, bend it. So if you have, maybe your fingers are getting sore, you just keep grabbing it a little bit, bend the wire, grab it, bend, and you just keep going around in a circle until you make your loops. Okay? So I'm going to keep doing that until I get to the top. If I get a loop that's looking too big, I can just squeeze that loop down, make it a little smaller as I'm going. Sometimes I get a little too big, and I see that, and then I stop and I readjust it. And then I go back to bending my circles, my loops. You can also do it like this, where you just turn the leg. So I'm turning my leg around like this, and I'm just using my fingers to make the loops. Again, I'm trying to leave a little space there. I don't want to wind it tightly around that skeleton or the bone that's inside the leg. I just want to keep making loops. And then when I get to the top or close to the top, I might go back and change some of the sizes. If I feel like I've made it too thin or too thick, I can still move it. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to go ahead and go 7, just to make sure I've got enough loops on there. Okay, so now you can see got my foot, I got my lower leg, I've got my thigh, coming up here, and I'm getting close to this hip loop. So now I just want to look at it and see if I've got anything that looks really too big. Some of these loops are a little big, so I'm just going to tighten them up a little bit. Just by turning these loops like this around the leg, I can make them smaller. Again, later I can go back and I can make them even smaller yet. So they're still a little big. So I'm going to keep going here and make it just a little bit smaller. Alright, so now I'm at that place now where I'm going to lock this down right below this hip. So I'm going to grab this wire and I'm going to squeeze it. I'm going to hold this wire right against my armature or my skeleton of this. So again, I've got this wire tightly squeezed against the bone wire here, this armature. And then I'm going to do another lockdown. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now what I've got is I've got my thigh. I can go back and I can adjust, and I can mess with this later and get it to be just the right size, but for now I have my leg. So I've got all the loops for the lower leg locked down by the knee, all the loops for the upper leg locked down by the hip, and now I'm ready to go across and make leg number 2. So take your ruler, measure 2 inches from this loop over to this, and then you're going to grab that with your pliers right at the 2-inch mark. Okay, there's my ruler in the background, there's my 2-inch mark, and I'm going to make another loop for the other hip. So now I have this hip loop 2 inches from there over to there, and I've made another loop, and now I'm ready to start the second leg. So this one doesn't look finished yet, it's kind of crooked, but I'll go back later and I'll adjust some of these loops. I got all the loops on that I needed to, so it's okay. I can come back later and I can kind of fine-tune those loops, but for right now I've got all the loops on there that I need to sculpt it into a leg. Okay, so now I'm up here at the top where my hip loop is, 2 inches between the loops, and then I'm going to measure down like I did on this side where the other knee is, which was 3 inches. So if I take my loop and I put it there and I measure over to 3 inches, and then I hold that with my pliers, and then I make another loop. This is a good time you can check to see where your other knee is. Sometimes it's a little short, so like this one goes down a little farther. So I'm going to move that loop down a little bit. Okay, so now I've got my 2 hips, I've got my knee, and now I'm going to measure another 3 inches down, and I'm going to make my ankle loop. Okay, that one's just a little too big, so I'm going to squeeze that down a little bit. Okay, so you can see hip loop, knee loop, ankle loop. Okay, and then I'm going to take 2 inches, bend it in half, and this is going to be my other foot. So there's the ankle. And then I've got my little paper clip thing again for the foot, like so. Okay. And then I'm going to check to see if I've got the right length for my legs so that they both look like they're about the same size. This is where I could make some adjustments. I'm pretty close. I could adjust my hip loop just a little bit. Okay, and then that looks pretty good. So both legs look about the same length, and my hips are even, and my knees are even, and my ankles are in the same place, and my foot. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this and I'm going to twist this wire up around the base of this until I get all the way back up to the top. And then I'm going to wrap it around this. We're going to call this the pelvis wire here. This is the middle of your body here. We're going to tie it off right here, and then we're going to do something kind of scary. We're going to cut our wire. So let me show you how this works. So first, I'm going to just start twisting it around my leg. This is where I like to kind of bend this out. So you remember how we did the first leg? We twisted the wire up around the leg all the way to the top. Just be patient with the wire. If you need to grab it with your pliers, you could hold it like this. Again, what we're doing here is we're twisting the wire up so that it is tightly wrapped around this leg, so that's going to give us more strength. So it looks more like the first leg. It's got 2 layers of wire. And then I'm going to go around this wire here and just make this a little bit stronger here. So now you can see I started down here at the base and I twisted the wire up around that first wire, back up here. So it looks like my first leg now. It's got 2 wires twisted. Okay, so there's that twisted wire, and then I come up here to the top and I'm going to lock it down around this wire here. So if I grab this, again I'm holding the wire, I'm going to twist around really carefully to get that locked down. So there's my lockdown right there. Okay, so this leg is now stronger and it's locked down right there. Now this is this kind of scary moment. Make sure it's locked down before you do this. You're going to take your pliers and you're going to cut this off. Cut your big wire off right here. Okay, so now I've got my legs separate. So that's where you're at. And then our next step is we're going to tie the wire back in down here at the foot. And then we're going to make our loops again for the lower leg, make our loops for the upper leg, and we're going to lock it down up here at the hip again, and then we'll have 2 legs that look the same. And that is as far as you're going to get today. So let me show you how to lock this down around your foot. This is a little trickier, and this is the one where you may have to help each other out a little bit. And this may also be the part where if you get stuck today, since I'm not there to show you and demonstrate, it's okay. But I'm going to show you how to do it, and we'll just kind of, if you get to this point, maybe you figure out how to do it and you can help some other people do it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and let myself, I'm out of wire, so I got all the way up to there. So I'm going to get a little more wire out, so take off my Velcro. And then take out another arm's width of wire, about 6 feet or so. And then I can drop this back down. Okay, so I've got my loose end now. And then I've got this where I cut it off, up here where I locked down. So now I need to reattach it down here at the foot. So what I want to try to do is to get it wrapped around the toe. So I put the wire through the toe like this, and then I'm going to bend it like this, so it's through the toe. I'm leaving myself a little extra wire here, and then this is the tricky part. I'm going to try to hold this wire right at the tip of my toe, and this is my extra piece of wire. And this is where you probably want to use your other pliers to bend this back up inside the foot. If I can show you that. See how the wire is going up now through the foot? And then I'm going to pull that wire with my pliers. And what I'm trying to do is to lock this down at the tip of my foot again. So I go back up through. So I'm sort of like threading it through like a needle and a thread up through this foot. Lost my grip on it. Okay, so now you can see here I'm back at the tip of the toes, and I've locked some of this wire down. Again, if it's loose, you can always squeeze these loops and make them tighter. And I would say for right now, if it looks a little rough and it's not holding perfectly, once we get the foot done, you'll be all right. All right, so now I've got it at the foot, at the tip of the toe, and I'm going to go back to what I was doing, and I'm going to make my foot loops. So I start looping the wire around again like I did my first foot. So there's my first loop for the toe, and then I'm going to keep looping it around this way until I get to the ankle, and then I'm going to lock it down, and then I'm going to loop it up here 6 or 7 times until I get to the knee, just like I did this leg. Lock it down. Then I'm going to make the thigh loops up around there, 6 or 7 loops. And then I'm going to lock it down right below this hip loop right here, just like I did over here. And then when you get to that point, I want you to stop. When we get into the next section of the torso and all of that, it's going to start to get more complicated. So I don't really want you to attempt that until I come back. So your goal for today, if you can get there, is to get the first leg done, go over 2 inches, make this loop, make the knee loop, make the ankle loop, make the foot, and then twist it around, go back all the way up to the top, twist it around here, lock it down right there, cut your wire, go back to here, lock it down at the toe the best you can, start looping again to make the foot, lock it down at the ankle, loops to make the lower leg, lock it down at the knee, loops to make the upper leg, lock it down below the hip, and then don't cut it off, don't do anything else, just stop. And that will be as far as you get today. Some of you may not get there, some of you may get there. It's okay either way. I know that for some the wire seems easier for you, and for others it's been a real challenge already. So just try to be patient. Your fingers get sore, take a little break for a second. Try to use your pliers whatever you can so that you're not getting too frustrated and your fingers aren't getting sore. And if you can get the legs at least partially done today, that would be fantastic. And then the next time we will talk about the next steps to start the torso.